today we're going to build a digital clock. And we're going to do a stopwatch. And you're going to see how easy it is. And then I'm going to leave you some stuff to do. But this is the assignment we're working on. It's project number 3. So the second one was that dreaded tic-tac-toe game we did several times. You should know that one by heart. Number 3 is the digital clock. So here we have, it's in 2 parts, part 1 and part 2. Well, actually, there's just part 1, it looks like. Oh, part 1, and part 2. Okay, so here we have. We're going to create a simple functioning clock for an iPhone. Okay, so you can do it for an iPad if you want as well. It doesn't have to be just for iPhone. So the first part number 1, we're going to create a simple program that includes a UI label showing the functioning clock. You're going to walk away with that one today. If you follow through the instructions and do it on your own, you're going to walk away with that one. Number 2 says create a stopwatch program. It's based on your first one. So you can do them both together and turn in one assignment, one project, because your stopwatch program is going to have a digital clock on it. Okay, so it should have 3 buttons. It should have 3 buttons: a start, a stop, a reset, and a clock. Reset and a clock. And a clock, okay. The clock should show the hours, the minutes, and the seconds. We're going to do that momentarily. And the view should begin with a start button highlighted and enabled. Well, I guess that just means it's functioning, it's enabled. And the other buttons either highlighted or enabled or nor enabled, so they're not enabled. They're not clickable. Because you can't stop until you start it. So we'll show you the buttons in a few minutes as well. Pressing the start button should restart the clock, disable, and unhighlight the start button. So when you click on the button, it's going to enable the stop if it's the start button, and make sure that it's actually functional. So, and pressing the stop button should stop the clock, disable the stop button. So after you press stop, you can't stop again. So you disable it. And enable the highlighted of the reset button. So pressing the reset should reset the clock to 0. I'll show you that. And disable and highlight. Okay, so you gotta have some buttons on there. You're gonna have a clock. So that's pretty much the gist of the program. So hopefully we don't have any questions about this one. What we're building in class, you can turn in. We're not gonna do the whole thing. We're gonna start it out. So I'll probably end up doing the whole thing, but we'll just see. All right, so if you went into the EMS, you downloaded the 2 on the bottom here. We're going to have 2 tutorials. One's called Date Picker, and the other one's called Digital Clock Tutorial. We're going to start with the one that's called Digital Clock Tutorial. It's a text file. They're both text files. And if you click on Digital Clock Tutorial and download the file, it looks like that. It's a text file. Okay. I'm going to open up mine in preview, however. Why is my screen so big? I think I zoomed in or something. So let's see, this one's called Simple Clock. So I'm going to open it up in the preview because it just looks better on my screen. Used to have preview showing up. Hold on one second, let me just find it now. Preview. I guess I can't open up text in preview, so let's just do it this way then. I'll open it up in text Wrangler. Well, that looks pretty good. Let me change the view a little bit. I wanted to make the view. Wanted to have the fonts bigger so you could see it from the back of the room. There we go. That looks pretty big. That looks pretty good. And let me also take off this side piece over here. Let's see. Actually, I will just leave it alone. I don't know where it is on here. View. That's right. We'll just leave it. Text display. Hide the line numbers. There we go. Okay, so now we're looking pretty good. So you guys all ready? I gave you enough time to download it and everything. So we're going to create a single view application, and we are going to add a label to the interface file. This is a very old tutorial, but it should still work. I'm going to retro instruction it to the current. So let's see what happens. So the first instruction has never changed. Go ahead and open up Xcode. So we're still using Xcode. And create a new Xcode project. Select the first option there. And this is a single view application that we're going to create, so make sure that one is connected and press next. Oh, what should we call this? How about digital clock. Digital clock, there we go. And I'm actually going to make mine for the iPhone because I like the interface better. It looks good better on the simulator. So go ahead and press next and go ahead and create the project. So now we have our project out. Hopefully we've gotten that far. Click on the storyboard. Mine is called main.storyboard. I'm going to beautify my screen here. I always change the background color a little bit. So let's see. I'm going to change the background color to my green. Oops, that's the tint. Let's change the background color. A little bright green going on here. I'm going to take the tint off though. And we'll just leave that one alone. Okay, so make mine a little darker. There we go. That looks a little bit better. Alright, so go ahead and grab a label from the library and drag it onto your canvas. So this is going to be label. And when you drag it onto the canvas, oh, it's nice to have a working mouse. So, why dragging works. Go ahead and make the label big, because we're going to have it take up most of the screen. And go ahead and let's increase the font size to something big, like I'm going to make mine 28. I'm going to make mine 30. I'm making it even 30. So I've got a huge label here. This is going to obviously show my clock, and I'm going to center my results. So if I leave the word label here, I can easily see what's going on with the interface. So that looks pretty good. We all got a label on there, I hope. So let's see what comes next. So now, after we've added the label to the canvas, we're going to wire it. So we're going to edit the viewcontroller.h file, and we're going to need to wire the label. Let's see what I'm going to call the label here. I actually have to go off my instructions because, this is one of my older tutorials and it wasn't quite as detailed. So let's see, interface and wire to the canvas. Okay, let's just call it display. How's that? So go back to the Xcode. Click on the tuxedo icon, so you have the code in the middle here. Get rid of the side if you'd like. Oops, I didn't want to do that. Okay, there we go. And let's see. Flip over to viewcontroller.h. So I've got viewcontroller.h in front of me here. And I'm going to wire the old label here by clicking on the label, pressing down the control button, and getting the little blue arrow, letting go. I'm going to call this one display. Could probably call it clock display or display. Eventually what we're going to do is update the label text to include the text of the NS clock that we're going to create. So go ahead and press connect. And so now you have a label property that is created. Now let's go take a look at our instructions again. Our instruction says we're going to keep and we're going to make an instance of NS timer, and we're going to call it my ticker. My ticker. So I'm going to do this manually so you can see what I'm doing here. So I'm going back here, and I'm going to stick this above my property. So I'm going to put an opening and a closing parenthesis first, because I'm going to make a variable declaration in here. It's going to be an NS timer. So I'm going to start typing in NS, and then I'm going to go T, and I'm going to get NS timer showing here. So this is a timer object. We're still in viewcontroller.h. It's a timer object that we're going to use to keep track of the current time. So I'm going to put an asterisk in here and call it my ticker. So I have an NS timer, my ticker. And now we're going to see what comes next. So let's see. So NS timer, my ticker. And then underneath that I got a strong, and this one was called clock label. Here it is here. I called it display. It doesn't really matter what you call it. Leave it on display. I'll remember that further down the road. And I put the NS timer above it. And make sure you do include those opening and closing brackets, because you need to do that when you're declaring your variables like that. Unless you're using property. If you're not using property, you don't have to worry about that. Because we're using property, we're going to want to synthesize it. We have to remember to do that part. But we're also going to add some methods first. So in the viewController.h, where we're still at, we're going to add a runtimer and a showActivity method. And we're going to declare these method prototypes or functions that we're going to write. So here I'm just going to copy and paste from this text file because I don't want to type. And I'm going to put it right underneath my property here. I'm going to move that up a little bit. So now I've got my two method prototypes that I'm putting in. And these methods are both void. And one of them is going to be called runtime, and the other one's going to be called showActivity. They're going to work together so we can update the clock. Okie dokie. So now we're going to open up the viewController.m, and then we're going to add the unimplemented, because we haven't implemented them yet, method bodies that we just declared. And there's going to be 2 of them. And we're going to put them in the .h file. But before we do that, let's not forget to synthesize. So I'm going to go back up here and move over to the, because we have this one property here called display that we need to synthesize. So I'm going to go ahead and click on viewController.m. And up the top here, right underneath @implementation, I'm going to add an @synthesize. And I'm going to put here display. So we synthesize the display. Are we okay back there?
No, you're going too fast.
Am I going too fast? Should I pause for here? Let me pause for a second. Okie dokie, so now we're ready to continue. We synthesized the display, so I have the synthesize in there. And now I'm going to need to add the implementation of those 2 methods. So let's start with the first one. So we're now on step number 5 of the downloaded file. We got a little timer here. It's called runtimer. That's our method. I'm going to copy and paste the runtimer into the code and then tell you what the code's doing, so you can sort of see how this works. So I'm going to put it right at the top, right above view did load. I just made some spaces so I can see it. And I'm going to make this one go this way a little bit more. So I have this method called runtimer. And I put a little comment in here so you can see what it's doing. But it's going to start the timer, which fires the showActivity method. And it fires the showActivity method every 0.5 seconds. So every half a second, it's going to trigger the showActivity. So the showActivity will update the activity fairly accurately, and it'll look like a running clock. So my ticker, remember my ticker? That's the NS timer that we created in the viewController.h. It's equal to an NS timer. This is the name of the object, the object type, I should say. Scheduled timer with time interval. It's the method that is used to schedule the timer with a time interval of 0.5. The target is the self-selector. What's the self-selector? Well, self-select, out of all the methods you got for yourself, select, and the @selector is the interesting thing. So this here says @selector means run one of my methods. And the method that I'm going to run is called showActivity. And the showActivity is going to update the display. So also we have the user info is nil. We didn't set any info for this. And repeats, yes. Just repeat it every 0.5 seconds. So every 0.5 seconds it goes and gets the current time, which is what the NS timer is. And then updates the showActivity. Well, showActivity is going to be pretty simple. We just have to take the object that we get, the information from the object that we get, separate out the hours, the minutes, the seconds, add them together and put them on the label. So that was the easy method. So let's go ahead and copy the second method in there as well. I shouldn't say it's not hard, but you see there's a few more lines of code in it. So let's go ahead, and we're still in step number 5. Take both methods and put them in viewController.m. And so let's put this one in. Now you're going to see there where it says clock label. I called mine display. So anything that down here on the bottom, and let me go through the code and then I'll make the change for you so you can see what I'm talking about. So this method runs every 0.5 seconds because it's called by the NS timer every 0.5 seconds. And it's created in the function run timer. So here we're going to say NS date formatter. Well, we're going to format a date. And it's going to be, our variable is going to be called formatter. So we have an asterisk formatter. This is our temporary object reference. And the object type is an NS date formatter. And we're going to allocate and we're going to initialize this object. And this is the same thing you would be doing for a OS X application as well. You can do the same thing. You can create your own clock in a Objective-C application for the computer or for the iOS cell phone. Okay, NS date. We'll get the date. NS date. So get the date from the NS date object and copy it into date. So date is actually date and time like it is in Unix and other languages. So formatter, this is our NS date formatter, is going to be equal to set time style to NS date formatted with medium style. Medium style looks like this. So we got small, medium, and large. Small is just the time. Medium's got the AM and the PM along with the hours, minutes, and seconds. Large has got the date and the time together. It's got everything. We don't want the date, so we're going to pick the medium style. So we got hours, minutes, and seconds with an AM or a PM. And then we're going to take, and now where it says clock label, change it to what you called your label. This is called display, yes. I think I called mine display, actually. I think I have mine with a lowercase d. So if you have an uppercase d on yours, put it in there. I believe me, mine's a lowercase. Whatever you synthesized, so it wasn't too hard. We just changed it in one spot. If you went through and dragged it and dropped it and changed it after that, your program's probably not going to compile. So it's probably better just to leave it alone and just use that one. In reality, it should clean itself up, but it doesn't. Okay, so let's go see what we have next. That was step number 5. So now we have the run timer method that only has one line of code in it, split into multiple lines, actually. So all it does is show the activity method every 0.5 seconds. The show activity method formats the clock so it can look at the 12, 15, or 12, 12, 12, and then sets it to the current time as mentioned above. And the method is called every 0.5 seconds. So we want to call the run timer after the view loads. So it's a common way of doing it in Xcode. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Here we go. So we're going to add a set self run timer to the view did load method so that when the view loads, it loads the timer. Otherwise our program's going to start and nothing's going to happen. Actually, you can run it right now and you're going to see nothing happening. It's just going to show the label. So go ahead and put this guy here. I'm just going to copy, because I already have the view did load method. I'm just going to take the self run timer and open up my Xcode project and come right down beneath it here. And in my view did load method, I'm going to run the self run timer. So self space run timer is a way of running the run timer, which calls the update show activity that updates the label for me. So let's take a look to see if I've missed anything. Compile and run and see the clock working. Okay, so let's try it out. Press the old start button. And let's make sure you got a working clock before we continue. So if I press my start button and I wait a few minutes, look at that, I have a working clock. You guys have a working clock?
Yes.
How many people don't have a working clock? How many people want a few more minutes before we continue? Okay, so let me pause this for a second. Okay, we're going to start back up again. So now that you have working clocks, let's add some functionality to it. So this was part 1. So you're going to continue with this project, and now we're going to do part 2, or we're going to do parts of part 2. We'll see what happens here. So part 2 is going to have some start and some stop buttons. So I'm going to actually start with the interface, and then I'm going to catch up with the text file and see what happens. I'm going to kind of try to sort of predict what happens here. So we're gonna have to put some buttons on here. So go ahead and let's, what was it? Reset, start, stop, and reset. So, okay, so let's go button. Drag 3 buttons over and label them start, stop, and reset. So I'm just gonna put them underneath. This one's gonna be start. Why is my background? You know what? I don't know. Text color. Let's change the text color to black. Start. Stop. My colors got messed up. And then reset. Maybe I shouldn't have messed around with my colors like that. I don't know why I have shadow colors on here. That's all right. I will just leave it alone. Here, we'll go back, put it on default. So I'm going to make my labels a little bit bigger because they're kind of small for me to see. So I'm going to go ahead and raise them up to about 20 each. So, and I got the regular iOS 7 looking buttons on here. Are you having problems? So outside of a few cosmetic issues, are we all good? Okay, very good. All right, so let's go take a look at the instructions. I don't want to get too far ahead, but we're going to compile it and run it. Oh, this one only said to add 2, so we're going to do 3. And what do we have here? We have a start and a stop clock. Okay, we're going to add a label and wire the properties as counter timer. Oh, it looks like we're going to need to put another label here too, because we're going to put a stopwatch on here. So we got the time. So go ahead and let's put another label down here. And let's put, I'm going to put the label underneath. And let me make this one bigger. And I'm also going to center this one as well. And I'm actually going to put here timer on here so I remember which one is supposed to go here. And it's going to be replaced by time anyway. So how about a stop? I'm going to put here stop watch timer. So when I start using it, the stopwatch timer will, let me make the font a little bit bigger here. Oh, we'll make it 25, there we go. We'll show the start and the stop time. Or we'll keep time. I'll keep time for us. Okay, very good. So let's take a look here. Okay, so we're going to have to keep a counter. And the idea is we're going to start the timer and then stop the timer, and we're going to count. So we're going to keep track between the start and the stop, how many minutes went by or how many seconds went by, depending upon what we're counting. So we're going to have to add an integer to keep track of the counter. We're also going to need to create some function bodies, some method bodies for those buttons we just put on there. So go ahead and go to the viewcontroller.h file. And in viewcontroller.h, I'm going to call this one here integer, let's see what I called it in the instructions here. Counter int. So add integer counter int as a variable to the viewcontroller.h file. So counter int. Counter int. Do we all get that far? Just like actually we did this the other time with the tic-tac-toe game. We made variables for a number of players and stuff like that. So we're just going to keep track of the counter. Okay, now I'm going to stick below here. I'm going to make, so I'm right mouse clicking on the buttons now, and I'm going to make some touchdown events for each one of the buttons. So this one here was start. So I'm actually just going to call it start button, stop button, and reset button. Make it easier for myself. So I'm going to take the touchdown event and then wire this one to start button. And I'm going to change the type to UI button only because then later on I can take a look at it and see what it is. And then I'm going to create a stop button. Also taking the touchdown event, call this one stop button. And reset button. This should be starting to become a little bit easier for you, I would hope, because we've done this every week. Reset button. So I have my 3 method prototypes for each one of the actions for each one of my buttons, plus I have my integer. So I'm ready to work on it in the viewcontroller.m file. So I'm going to leave this here for a few minutes because I suspect some of you are still doing this. Am I correct? So I'm going to pause the video. Alright, so let's see what's next on the agenda here. So I'm going back to the viewcontroller, well, I'm going to have to edit the viewcontroller.m file. So now we have a couple methods we have to fill in. So I have the start clock and the stop clock. Well, the start clock is going to take my ticker and it's going to keep time just like we did before. Except for now we're going to have another selector that's going to run, and the selector is going to be show activity, which is just like we did before. So the start clock is going to be used instead of the viewDidLoad method. So go ahead and just take that one line. We're in step number 10 right now. Take the one line of code that's in there, because there's only one line of code in here, and stick it in the start button. So in your start button, you have to go into the viewcontroller.m file. And at the top, we have the start button. In the start button, I've now got my ticker, which was the ticker that I used before. We're just going to reuse the same variable. And I'm going to have a little thing here. It's going to say show timer activity. Well, that's a new method we're going to put in here. And the show timer activity doesn't exist yet, which is why I have this undeclared selector. Because up here was show activity. So show timer activity is going to be different. So let's go take a look to see what that one's going to look like. Excuse me? No, we're going to make a new method called show timer activity. We're not going to use show activity. Don't change it to show activity. We're going to put a new one. We're going to put a new method in here. Here it is here, actually. Because we don't want to show just the clock. We want to show how many minutes are elapsing. So we're going to take the counter int plus equals 1. Just like saying counter plus plus, but we're going to have, this is the, it's kind of like C code. Works the same way. Now we're going to calculate the hours, the minutes, and the seconds. And then we're going to set the counter time.text to this string that we're going to create by putting in the hours, minutes, and the seconds. And this is going to need to change with whatever we called that label, which I didn't actually create a property for yet, so I'm going to have to remember to go back and do that. But before I create that property, let me just explain the string. We saw this last week with the tic-tac-toe game, actually, and a string with format. And we have a format here where we're going to put in hours, minutes, and seconds. And it's going to be the hours, minutes, and seconds. And the hours, minutes, and seconds are going to be calculated by the timer for the hours divided by 3,600. The minutes is going to be the counter time divided by 60 minus the hour times 60. And then the seconds, which is just going to be the counter minutes minus the hours times 360 minus the minutes times the 60. Not a math class, don't worry about it. What we're doing is calculating from a counter of numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In the beginning, we're just going to have seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then, because only the seconds are going to show because everything else is going to be empty. So, and then we're going to have, because this is going to come out 0, 0. And then we're going to have eventually 1 hour after, well, 1 minute after 60 seconds comes by. After 60 minutes, we're going to have an hour show up if we keep it running long enough. So let's go ahead and call that label counter time. So go back to your Xcode project. That's the stopwatch. This is actually called counter time. So let's say open up the viewcontroller.h file, and I'm going to put this property underneath the display property. So I'm going to click on the property, press down the control button, drag it over, call this one counter time. It's a UI label. Go ahead and press connect. And then I'm going to need to go to the viewcontroller.m file and synthesize it as well. So I'm going to come up to the top, and I'm just going to put a comma after display and put in counter time. Oops, I put a capital I in mine. And as I mentioned before, I'm just going to leave it alone. Why am I going to leave it alone? Because if I fix it, my whole project's not going to compile correctly. So I have a typo, I'm just going to leave it alone. So next time, type slower so you don't get any typos if you don't want to avoid that problem, Okay, so let's go ahead and add the method now. So I'm going to go back to the back to step number 10 in the downloaded file. And I'm just going to copy this whole method, because this whole method, the whole method here doesn't exist yet. So I'm going to put the method I'm going to put the method above my stop button. I'll put it above the start button. Just to be consistent, I'll stick it right here. Doesn't matter where you put it. And then I have to change the I, make it capitalized because I have a typo. And now you see the other message went away down here because show timer activity exists. Now our stop button is pretty much a no-brainer. Our stop button, let's go back up here, is going to take my ticker and invalidate it. What's that mean? It's going to stop it. It's no longer a valid object. We're just going to invalidate it, and then we're going to set my ticker to nil. Isn't that sort of a reset? Yeah. When you set the object to nil, and then the next time you use it, it'll be initialized again. So we are actually resetting it. Well, let's just take a look and we'll observe the functionality, and then we can start playing around with it to see what happens. Because I could just invalidate it and not garbage collect it. So let's copy this into the stop clock or stop button, whatever you called it. So now over here, I'm going to leave the reset alone for right now. We just want to see the functionality work. Now we can leave the viewDidLoan method alone, and we can leave the original functionality alone as well. We can just have that run, and we can also use it with the stop and the start. So let's take a look here to make sure I haven't missed anything in terms of my steps. Compile and run, test and start and stop functionality. Now you should have a working stopwatch. Well, let's just take a look to see what the functionality gives us. So I'm going to go ahead and press the start button. And I have a build successful. So I got my running time, and I'm going to press start. Now I got 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to press stop. Okay. So I have 5 seconds went by, so I'm going to press start again. 6, 7, 8. So I haven't really reset it yet. So there's no reset on here yet, obviously. And now I can probably press start again without, so now I have stop running. Now I have to press stop twice because I pressed start twice. But now my stop's not working because I messed it up by pressing start. So at the beginning of the program, you probably are going to want to, let's just play around now with the buttons for a second. But before we do that, I'm going to pause for a second and get people to get caught up. Here, I'll put my stopwatch out while this is going on. And then next what we're going to do is play around with functionality a little bit. Make it a little bit, so I'm going to keep both of them running here. Let me pause this video. Alright, so I've been testing out my my timer. It took me 8 minutes to help everybody. So let's stop. And so I can see it stopped. If you press the start more than once, you're going to get double instances of it. If you do that, you can't stop it. It won't stop. So only hit the start button once. However, if you hit the start button and it starts, should you be able to start it again? Well, that's where you can change the enable and the disable around. So let's go take a look at the button functionality as promised. So if you click on the start button, that's this guy up here, it's going to set your timer and stuff. Shouldn't it sort of like hide itself or disable itself? So you can send a message to itself to say, you know, as an example, enable false or hidden true or something. And then that way you're not tempted to click on it again and you know you've already clicked on it once. So if the button is called start button, we don't actually have a property for this yet. We only have an action. So if we create some properties for our buttons, we can go ahead and change the properties that are associated with them. So it's kind of a play on words here. So go back to the viewcontroller.h file. And in the viewcontroller.h file, right underneath the other two properties that I have, one for the two UI labels, I'm going to make a label. I'm going to make a property for start, stop, and reset. So I'm going to control drag now, and I'm going to call this one start. I think I called them start button before, didn't I? So I don't want to use the same names again. So I'm going to just go S button here. And then this one's going to be, this is going to be op button. So I can't use the S, can I? Let's just be creative. I'm going to control drag it over. This is going to be ST button. So the other one was S button. This is ST, I guess. ST works, I guess. And then this is going to be R button. So I'm going to control drag it. It doesn't really matter what you call it. Just remember what you call it. R button. So now I have the 3 button properties. So I'm going to go over and synthesize it now over in my viewcontroller.m file. So I'm clicking over to viewcontroller.m. And right at the top, I'm going to put a comma after counter time. I'm going to start S, so I got S button, ST button, and R button. So I added my buttons here. So now when I click the button, let's just look at the start for a second. I called that S button. I can remember that part. So now I can say S button, like for example, S button. And if I go done, I can sort of see appearance. I can see I've got background color. I've got bounds, button type, class. If I type in E for enable, enable is going to be a Boolean. So I typed in E because I got tired of looking through the menu.
Small correction.
Yes?
Button.
Correct, thank you. S button, you're right. You saved me millions of hours of troubleshooting here. So now I've set the S button, S for stop. Maybe I could have come up with a better one here. So the assignment said to enable, disable. So I've got the S button dot enabled to true. I don't want to do that one. I set to false because I'm trying to make it not enabled. I click the button and all of a sudden the button's not enabled anymore. And then I'm just going to copy this one because when I press the stop button, I want the start button to be enabled again. So over here on the stop button, underneath it, I'm going to put the same code I just put over there, but I'm going to now change the false to true. And then I'm going to test it.
It will be the same.
It's the same button. So the start button, when you press the start button, I want to disable the start button. Disable the start button. Set enable to false. And then when I press the stop button, I want that start button to be enabled again, so I can go press it again. So let's just check it out and see what happens here. That way I'm not going to accidentally hit that start button many times. I'm only going to hit it once. So I hit the start button. Now if I click on it, nothing's happening to it. I can't start it again, but I can stop it.
Or it start is working. It's working.
No, stop should make it work again. 8, stop. No, we haven't started. We haven't done anything with stop yet. We're working with start. Okay. If you really want to do something to it, you can change it, make it hidden if you don't want to see it. So maybe we'll just, okay, for those people here who need a little help here, S button dot hidden. And we'll make hidden true. And then we'll go down here. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Hidden was going to be false. We have to set hidden to false. Because this is on the stop. So on the start, we're going to set it to true. So S button dot hidden is going to be equal to true. So now what I did, just so you guys can see what's going on here, when you click on the start button, it's going to hide now. When you click on the stop button, it's going to come back because we're going to set the hidden to false. So we had to set the hidden to true. So instead of enabling and disabling it, I've left that on there actually. I'm now going to change it so one's hidden and one's shown. So now if I press on the start, it's gone. My button went away, but I press the stop, it's back on. So you may play around with this, use this as an opportunity to explore some of the other properties. You can change the colors of the button, gray it out, do whatever you want with it to make it visibly look like, you know, it stopped and started. What is this? This is a counter. So let's take a look at the reset button for a second here. But before I finish with the reset button, let me just get the stop button to work as well. So when we hit the stop button, we're going to disable ourselves because we can't stop more than once. And when we start up the program, how can we stop if we haven't started yet? So the stop button is ST button. So after we click on the stop button, we're going to say ST button. Let's just put the same behavior in. Enabled is going to be equal to false. And then ST button hidden is going to be equal to true. So we click on the stop button. Now we're not enabled and we're hidden. So I'm going to take and copy this code and go back up to the start button. And when we start, we want to make sure we can stop. So we're going to take and set this properties here for our stop button by saying enables now true, which means when we click on it, something's going to happen. And now the hidden is false. So what do we want initially? We want it to be false. Excuse me, we want it to be hidden, and we don't want it enabled. So I'm going to take the stop button code here, copy and put it in the view-did-load method. Because when the view loads, we're pretty much setting the default. So, oops, you're right, it's down. Where's that view? Here it is, thank you. So now that we run the timer, let's put it up here. So now the stop button is enabled to false, and it's also hidden. So let's test out the stop and the start button now. So I have no stop button. So instead I'm going to hit start, and look at that, I have a stop button. And look, I have a timer running, so I'm going to hit stop. Now the start button's on there again, and my timer stopped. So I'm going to go start, and now I got 6, 7, 8, stop. How am I going to reset the sucker? It's fairly easy. What am I resetting? You guys can tell me how to do the reset button. Alright, so let's go in and take a look at the code for a second. The show timer activity is doing all the work of the show timer label. And the show timer activity is creating the string with the hours and the minutes and the seconds. But it's working with this counter int. So can we just set the counter int to equal to 0? And wouldn't that automatically reset everything for us? Let's try it out. So in the reset button, let's just type in here counter int. Oops, counter int is equal to 0. That seems pretty reasonable. So I set the counter int to equal to 0, which is set to by default when the program first starts up. Let's run it and see what happens when we click the reset button. Oh, it's 3:14 already. I guess I'm watching the time here.
Very closely.
Okay, so I'm going to go stop, hit reset, and start up again. 1, look at that. It's set to 1. But you know what? I'd like the reset button to also clear my display. Because look, I'm on 9. I'm going to stop it. Oh, actually, I was on 10, right? If I'm on 10, I hit the reset button. Nothing really happened. But when I press start again, I'm back to 1. So I know it worked. But I'm not really happy with the display, so let me do something else then. In fact, let's clean up this as well. So in here, I'm going to say, well, let's take this display here. And what is this? This is counter time. And we're going to set the text. Let's make it equal, dot text, have it equal to, let's just give it a blank string. How's that? So counter time dot text is equal to a blank string. Blank. Because why? We're going to add it anyway, right? And while we're at it, let's change this label up here to display. And let's make sure that that's set to nothing as well. So I'm going to go back up here. I'm going to go back down to the bottom to my view did load method. And if I really wanted to have a lot of safeguards, I'd initialize all the variables. I'd set counter int to equal 0. And then I would also set the display dot text to equal a blank string. And I'd also set the counter timer to equal this blank string as well. Now I'm guaranteed. Let's see what's wrong with this one here. This one says it's incompatible pointer type assigning UI label to and a string. Well, probably because I set the label. I need to put a dot text in here. There we go. Now I can set the property to a label. So you guys see what I just did? I set and initialized all of the starting data, and I initialized it to what I wanted it to be. That way, in the project, I can leave all these notes to self. So I've got the label, says the label. I wanted to change the label and put here clock display if I wanted to. That way it's self-explanatory what that is. And then down here it says stopwatch timer. And now I get the stop, the start, and a reset. So when I run the project, none of this stuff's going to show at the beginning. So everything is going to be blank except for what happens with the program, whatever gets populated. So you see it was all blank, and then the time showed up. It's a little cleaner. Then I can see it on the screen. I don't have to worry about it going away. So I got to stop. Now if I click on the reset button, it reset. But what happened here?
But it starts again from one.
Because it haven't stopped it yet. So I'm thinking, I don't know, do I like that functionality? I guess it's okay. I don't necessarily have to stop it, do I? So I'm just resetting it constantly, and then I can stop it, and then I can reset it. So I guess it's okay. You know, I don't know. Do you guys have any suggestions to make it better? Yeah?
It would be better if we don't disable that start-stop button so we can get to start at any time.
Oh, okay.
If it is enabled.
Well, you could do that. Yeah, your choice. You guys can play around with the functionality if you want. I don't know. Reset works, but if it's running and you reset, it just goes away for a second. It does reset it, but clearing it out doesn't do anything. You could have the reset run the stop. So you reset it, it stops, and then it enables. So let's go back to the reset button here. Here's our reset button. We could run one of our other methods by using self. So we can go here, self, and then we can run stop button. No, we can't do it that way. Let's hold on one second. That's the stop button. Hold on. Uno momento. Having an Objective-C brain thing here. Run timer works. Oh, let's see. It's going to say no visible interface. Because we haven't added. Yes, we did. Do I have stop button? Oh, I have to give it the event. So here's what I could do. Sender could be self. Self. And then it's going to say that incompatible pointer types sender. Let's see. Oops. That's not what I wanted. Hold on one second. Let me go back. Self isn't going. I'm sorry?
Self is stop button, then property name. Stop button, property name.
Yeah, the property name would work. Because I'm sending itself, it's an incompatible type, but I need to send it the property of the button, so the UI button that's on there. So I think I called it ST button.
Yeah, ST
Yeah.
button.
ST button works. So that should actually work. Yeah. I was just thinking to myself. So yes, so logically that makes sense. Sending itself, in some cases, actually sending the form self, if the self is a view or a controller, does work. So you might actually see that syntax occasionally. So let's see, start. Now the reset button did the stop, and it took it away. So my reset button now did my stop instead. So I can stop it, and then I can reset it. It's also going to stop it. So. I believe that's all the requirements wanted you to do for assignment number 3. Let's just take a look here.
Can you make it to be 0, 0, to be all zeros instead of disappearing?
You can. How would you do that?
Make it to be equal to 0.
How would you do that?
That's
How about, let me just give it to you. How about this? Wouldn't that do the same thing?
Yeah.
Let's see. The reset button, instead of making the string empty, it just sets it to 0. There we go. That was an easy fix.
And then now start.
Oh, start.
Sounds good. And then reset.
Reset. Are you in denial that it's working? I mean. Although, why should you be able to reset it after you reset
I
it?
just knew that. I was just testing you. You should say that to her.
Yeah.
What do you think about the reset when it hasn't even been started yet? We could take it a step further. I know this is kind of senseless at this point, but we could take the reset button. If we haven't started it yet, why would we have to reset it? So we could just add it to here, and we could say that, in fact, here's another thing too. You could probably take out the enables and the disables. If it's hidden, you can't do anything with it, right? So we could just, let me just show you something here. We could just take the R button dot hidden and make that one to false. And then originally, so if we start it, the reset is false. But by default, it's false. Actually, it's also false in the beginning. So let's go back up to, let's go to the view did load method. So if I want it in the beginning to be false, But once I've stopped it, I could make it reset. So let's put it in the, so it's false when it shows up. It's false when I hit, well, I guess it doesn't really matter when I hit start. Actually, let's take it out. Let's leave it enabled. When I hit the start, it turns to false. But then I can't reset it. I don't know. Nah, we'll just leave it alone. I know it's half a dozen or another. Here I've set it to hidden. If I'm going to set the hidden to true in my stop button, maybe in the start button I should set the hidden to false. So in my start button here, I'm going to make sure that at least I have it. So hidden is false and hidden is true. So now if I run it, the reset button will show up initially because I didn't set it in the view did load method. So it's going to be here initially. But if I do start, and then I go stop, well, start it is enabled. I'm never disabling it. So I guess if I hit the reset once, I could have it go away until I hit the reset again. Anyway, you guys can play around with this. I could go all day trying to figure out how to make the functionality better. But let me go, that's pretty much the end of this project. So what I'm going to do is just leave it as is. And I'll make sure to put this underneath the video along with the text file, just in case someone didn't get any of this. So I'm just going to go ahead and close this project actually. And this one was called Digital Clock. And let me just go back to the assignment number 3 for you.
I think it's both 3 and 4 together.
We'll take a look at 4 next as well then.
No, I just looked into the documents. We did both of them together.
Okay, yeah. Well, part number 3 had creating a UI label showing the functioning clock. That's what we just did. And then creating the stopwatch was number 2, part 2 of this one. So let me look real quick then. You're saying that we also did number 4. Let's just go in here. Let's just see real quick.
It should have start and stop button.
Is that what number 4 was?
Yeah. And it shows days, hours, minutes. It doesn't show days. Yeah.
In the 4th assignment, you're extending the simple functioning clock by using a clock programming assignment number 3, creating a timer program. We did that, showing one stop and start button. This is different. So I'm not going to do this part for you. You're going to do this part yourself. Let me make this a little bit bigger for those people in the back here. Remember we had 2 buttons. We had a start button and we had a stop button. And let's just make this. Let's just see if I can get this to go a little bit bigger. Okay, there we go. So we had a start button and we had a stop button. So we should have one start-stop button. So you're going to change the label on the button. So for assignment number 3, turn it in as is, as we just ended. That's fine. It has more functionality than you need to. Or you can stop at that functionality and continue. For assignment number 4, so we accomplished a lot today. We're going to take, and it should have only one start and stop button. And one picker. I'm going to show you a picker in a few minutes. That's the next project we're going to work on is the picker. And one clock. So you're going to have a picker in there too. So the clock is going to show the days, hours, minutes, and seconds. Remember, we just did hours, minutes, and seconds. We didn't do the days. And a countdown. So this is going to do a countdown. I am not going to do the countdown for you. You'll have to figure this out yourself, but I will show you a date picker in a few minutes. Use the picker to set up the amount of time to count down. So you're going to say 25, and it's going to go 25, 24, 23, 22, 21. So instead of counting up, you're counting down. And use the start button to set the clock with the desired time and then start the countdown. And then the label should change to stop when you click start. So you don't have to worry about all the disabling and enabling and stuff. Instead, you're going to have one button that's going to change its label to start and stop. And use the stop button to stop the clock and reset it to 0. So it's also going to be the reset button. Make sure your timer does something of your choice when the time is up. You could put an image on the screen or something. All you have to do is make something visible that's hidden. And then you can use assignment number 3, clock of the assignment, and just add the additional functions or features that you want to create a fresh program, or you can create a fresh program, it doesn't really matter. So I'm not doing everything for you, but let me show you the picker. So I'm going to continue onward. Actually, I'm going to stop this video just because it's a good stopping point.